So here we have the chess piece that I'm working on to finish for, I was hoping to have this finished for the show, but it got a little bit more complicated than I thought making the pieces. The idea for the chess pieces came from the drawings I have here. So we have the king, the queen, the bishop, the knight, the rook, and the pawn. And so you have the pawn, the rook, the knight, the bishop, king, and queen. So that will be the queen. So I still have to make the legs, the handle for the little, because these are all going to be like little mini teapots. So here the Amountie, the handle to what's going to be an outline of an Amountie, that will be the handle. And this little part right here, that's going to be the spout. So that'll be right on this shoulder right here. And the same with the king. The head goes up here, the spout will come off this side, and this arm will be the spout. And this one will be sort of like a handle, but it's just sticks off the side. And the bishop, this one here is the bishop, right there. So you have the spout and a handle, then you have the staff, which is based on a Moravian church, because the Moravians came to northern Labrador back in the, I think it was 1871, I believe, and they set up churches and buildings in northern Labrador and along the coast. And so the cross that you see on their head garb, that was part of their flag, and same with the staff. That was a very common shape that they used to use. So that's basically like a bishop or a minister of some sort to the church, and he's standing there and he's presenting or talking. The knight, they didn't have horses up north, so I decided to use the caribou. And when you lift off the antlers, that'll be the lid opening, and the mouth is the spout. The rook, which is this one, that's taken from the design of a komatik or the sleigh that they use to drag behind their dog teams. So this would be like the runner, and these are designed based on the boards that sit across the top. So here, this little one will be the lid, and the other three will be basically the handles. And then you have the pawn, which is the igloo, and that's these right here. And I'll explain the difference. So you have the pawn, which is the igloo. So what I want to do here is where the harpoon is usually used by men. That was the representation of men. And the spout is like a half of a ulu, which is the knife the Inuit women use. And then the flag is taken from the Moravian flag. And I wanted to have the three of them into the pawn because representation of the husband, the wife, and then how much they believed in, like they were like a little group sort of thing, so I included the Moravian into it as well, so that's where that takes it all in. So that's the pieces for this one. When it's finished, the silver, well, I'll be using the exact same woods as this, the bloodwood. So everything that's wood on this side will have the bloodwood, and everything that's wood on this side, which is the copper, will have the birch. And I thought I would have been able to finish these shapes a lot quicker, but as it goes, it goes. So the rest now, once I finish and get back home, I'll continue working on these until they're completed. This is my chess set number 2, 1771. If you know my work, you know that I make teapots normally. That's how I gain my recognition, were through my teapots, silver teapots. The first chess set I made was made with, one side was ivory and brass, the other side was serpentine and silver. But this time I wanted to make a teapot, or a chess set that were made with teapots, all little functioning teapots. Each one does function as a teapot. Some pour really nice, some are a little bit off, but that's just because of the design. And I'll show you a little later about which pieces come off as the lids and what work as spouts. But I wanted to basically I started out working with the idea of the Moravians that arrived in northern Labrador, Nain, Labrador in 1771. They came across, they introduced farming, growing vegetables. They did bring over animal at one time, or like livestock, but the livestock didn't really last long in the cold weather. The Moravians still have an influence in northern Labrador. If you're ever on a cruise line that enters Nain, they'll have a brass band, which was introduced to them by the Moravians, and they'll greet you at the harbor with a brass band, and as you leave, you'll also be greeted leaving with a brass band. So that's pretty much the littlest part that I can say. On the flags here on the ponds, that flag design is from their flag that they had, the Moravians, from paintings I came across. The idea with the ponds was the harpoon for a handle is the representation of the king. The spout on the ponds are a half of an ulu, the woman's knife. And in her hands, you'll see she's holding, on her left hand, she holds an ulu, and the king has his harpoon. And the flag, like I say, is a representation of Moravians and how they've been accepted into the community, into their homes. And that's the reason why I made those the way I did. The rooks, they are a representation of the komatik, or the sleigh that the dogs pull behind. And if you put the two of them together, they would become the two runners. But the boards along the side here, that's the lats that go across that you sit on or put your gear or whichever on. We don't have horses in northern Labrador or anything, so I use the caribou as its main reason for that. The bishop, the staff that he holds is taken from their design as well. That's part of the cross that they used, or the cross design they used on their staff and some of other ornaments they would have in the church. And the head garb is, with their flag design or the cross design on carved into it. The kings and the queen represent man and woman. So I wanted to keep them with like some Inuit garb, their parkas, things like that. This handle shape here on the queen, that's the representation of the Amountie that the women have their parkas that they put the babies in. So it was just under 2 years of a challenge. I chose chess sets. People ask me why I chose chess sets, and it's basically for a challenge. I, unfortunately, not yet. I don't know how to play chess. That will come down the road. But it did start out as a challenge for me to try and get them all as functional little teapots. And just to show you how they function as teapots, you lift up here and that's the lid. And each one of these will only fit each one that they sit on right now. They will not fit properly in any other one, so they all have to stay together. The rooks, they work like this, a little bevel on the bottom edge, so you take this off and that would be the lid, and the spout. And the knights, you lift off the antlers, and you have the lid, and then his mouth would be the spout. And there's a little post on the front that helps it from sliding off. With the bishop, you take off his head garb and you have the lid. And this arm is the spout. Now the kings, their head comes off, and the queen the same way. And this is representation of their parka, like their hood of their parka. And when you take off this hand, that's the lid, or the spout, sorry. So this fits back in, stays there, that's his hand. The queen is like this, and you take off her right hand, and you have the spout. So that was a challenge, just trying to figure out how I was going to have everything as a functional piece. But it was a nice challenge. Frustrating at times, which is like, not like anything with art, that's a common thing. But it's like a love-hate relationship. You love what you do, but you also hate it because it takes up so much of your time and your concentration. You don't get a chance to socialize much, or I don't get a chance to socialize much because I spend all my time in my studio working. And like I say, this was a very intense project. Just to make the ponds, we're close to like 5 months in finishing, because in order to keep them all similar or the same, that was the challenge there. And then each one had their own little challenge, but that's great. It's like a teapot. Every teapot has its own challenge, so that's great in that regard. In regard to the board, my son-in-law, Justin McDonald, he helped me with the board. He put a new border and the base on for me. And my nephew, Luke Harris, he made the original squares. Unfortunately, we did have to replace the border, but now it is much more solid. On this side, we have sterling silver and bloodwood. And this side, it's copper and wavy birch. The wavy birch is a local wood that my son-in-law, Justin, picked up for me. And the board itself is also made with bloodwood and wavy birch, just to keep everything together, sort of thing. I chose the teapots again, as I mentioned, because teapots are where I gain my recognition, and just the thought of having each one as a teapot was, you know, something to think about, and also have to work out a design so it can work as a functional teapot as well as a chess piece, like, so they work together. But yeah, it was a challenge, but it was a good challenge, I have to say. To do the piece, like I mentioned earlier, was like just under 2 years, but not by much. About 3 months of designing, 3 to 4, making wooden maquettes, making paper maquettes, just to get the size and the shapes to see if I appreciated it. And then it was at least, you know, going on to 16 to 17 months just to put the pieces together. So it was a long, arduous process, but well worth it in the end, I think, for myself.